The boards are continuing to work toward a converged revenue recognition standard that would replace most transaction and industry-specific revenue recognition accounting guidance in U.S. GAAP, including guidance in areas such as accounting for software and software-as-a-service arrangements, with principles applicable to all customer contracts, regardless of industry. While many transactions may be accounted for in a manner similar to today, notable differences from current U.S. GAAP will exist for certain transactions. This is particularly likely for many entities in the technology sector. I'm Scott Muir with KPMG's Department of Professional Practice and a part of the team following the board's joint revenue recognition project. Over the next few minutes, I will provide you with a high-level summary of some of the areas that may warrant particular attention by cloud service providers, or CSPs, as they prepare for implementation of the forthcoming standard. All of KPMG's defining issues and issues in-depth publications on the forthcoming revenue standard, covering all of the board's redeliberations of their 2011 exposure draft, are available at www.kpmginstitutes.com/financial reporting network. Identifying separate performance obligations likely will require greater judgment when evaluating a bundle of goods or services to determine whether they should be accounted for as a single performance obligation or as a number of separate performance obligations. An entity will account for a promised good or service as a separate performance obligation if it is capable of being distinct and is distinct in the context of the contract. The boards tentatively agreed to provide indicators that would be assessed to determine whether a good or service is distinct in the context of the contract. For example, a CSP would need to assess whether the software license and associated services are both distinct. If a vendor grants a software license that is not distinct because the customer cannot benefit from the license without the additional service, such as a hosting service, the vendor would account for the combined license and service as a single performance obligation satisfied over time. This is not necessarily the same evaluation as is done currently, where a CSP evaluates whether a hosting arrangement contains a software deliverable within the scope of the software revenue recognition guidance. Additionally, the forthcoming guidance is expected to note that certain activities a vendor must undertake to fulfill a contract are not performance obligations because those activities do not transfer goods or services to the customer. Setup activities that do not transfer any good or service to the customer generally would not be considered performance obligations, and any fees associated to those activities would be treated as non-refundable upfront fees. Many CSPs determined, based on the amendments to ASC subtopic 60525, established by ASU 2009-13, that they can separate certain of their implementation and other upfront professional services on the basis that such services have standalone value to the customer. CSPs would likely reach similar conclusions for those professional services under the forthcoming guidance. However, professional services that significantly customize the hosted offering or are otherwise essential to the customer's ability to derive benefit from the cloud service and are available only from the CSP would generally not be distinct. With respect to allocation of the transaction price under the forthcoming guidance, unlike the current requirements in ASC 60525, which limits the allocation of arrangement consideration to only non-contingent amounts, the forthcoming guidance does not contain such a limitation, and therefore, as compared to current guidance, CSPs may allocate additional revenues to distinct performance obligations, such as professional services provided at the outset of the arrangement, or to free or discounted service periods, such as an arrangement where the CSP provides the customer a discount on the first 6 months of services in a 24-month contract. The entity will also need to consider whether the arrangement contains a license that is transferred to the customer versus just a service arrangement, whether the license is a performance obligation that is satisfied at a point in time or over a period of time, and whether the revenue constraint is applicable to any variable consideration. In short, there are many additional and different considerations under the forthcoming standard, so many CSPs may find that the timing and nature of their revenue differs from their current accounting. Moving to the accounting for contract acquisition and fulfillment costs. Under the forthcoming guidance, costs to fulfill a contract and incremental costs of obtaining a contract recognized as assets would be amortized on a systematic basis consistent with the pattern of transfer of goods or services to which the asset relates. In some cases, the asset may be amortized over more than one contract when the asset relates to goods or services that will be provided under an anticipated contract that the CSP can identify specifically, for example, renewal options. The requirement to capitalize costs would not be new to CSPs that currently capitalize such costs, but would represent a significant change for those CSPs that do not capitalize contract acquisition or fulfillment costs currently, since capitalization would not be elective under the forthcoming standard when specified criteria are met. Additionally, for those that do capitalize contract acquisition costs, they may find that the capitalizable costs differ since only those costs that are incremental are capitalizable. Allocable costs are not. Many CSPs currently amortize capitalized acquisition and fulfillment costs over the non-cancelable contract term, while the forthcoming guidance will require CSPs to amortize such costs, under certain circumstances, over a period beyond the initial contract period. This may result in an accounting change for CSPs whose historical experience indicates that its contracts are expected to be renewed. So to conclude, at the time of this recording, we continue to expect the boards to issue a final revenue standard during 2013 with an effective date for public companies for years and interim periods within those years, beginning on or after December 15, 2016. CSP should stay tuned, as adopting the forthcoming revenue standard may be a significant task for some organizations because of the pervasive effect revenue can have on many financial metrics, reporting, and communications. There are many variables a CSP should consider when establishing accounting policies related to cloud services. In many cases, these policies will be a factor in how customer arrangements are structured and priced. We recommend that CSPs start early to analyze their existing arrangements and consider and prepare to respond to the accounting and business implications of the forthcoming standard.